For more on this, let's bring in former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, great to have you on this afternoon as we watch all of these developments. You saw it, I'm sure, firsthand for yourself, President Biden yesterday, placing the blame squarely on his predecessor for where things are in Afghanistan today. This was yesterday. Listen.
When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban. U.S. forces had already drawn down during the Trump administration from roughly 15,500 American forces to 2,500 troops in country. And the Taliban was at its strongest militarily since 2001.
Reaction, Mr. Secretary.
Well, Sandra, his math is right about the number of troops that we had withdrawn. His logic is absolutely pathetic. That we had drawn down from about 15,000 to about 2,500, and we had kept the lid on this thing. We had kept the strategic stability that mattered to the United States. President Trump wanted to get out, right? He wanted to get out when he started campaigning. He knew it was the right thing to do. We were executing that mission, but we had done so in a way that had made clear to the Taliban that there would be enormous costs connected to what they did if they touched an American, if they killed an American, or if they even so much as scared an American. And for 11 plus months from February of 2020, there wasn't a single American killed after we'd cut the deal with the Taliban. Because the Taliban knew that that deal meant one thing. It meant that they had a set of obligations. If they failed to live up to them, there would be enormous costs imposed on that. And we did. They broke some of it while we were still in office, their power sharing commitments, their commitments with respect to how they would respond to certain actions. And when they did, we imposed costs on the Taliban, and including on its senior leaders. This administration begged. They apologized. They didn't project American strength. And so as they began to make the decision to go down from 2,500, where we had achieved a level space where we could secure the American embassy, prevent exactly what you've seen these past 96 hours, they saw a Biden administration that was weak. They saw it be weak around the world, and they drove a truck through it. And you can see what's happening today around that airport. I know that airport very well. What's happening around that airport today is dangerous. There are still thousands of Americans that are going to really struggle to get there, and I pray that we get this right. The mere fact that they withdrew from 2,500 and have now had to put back 5,000 or 6,000 American soldiers tells you how terribly executed this important strategic mission was for the United States of America.
Mr. Secretary, it's important, the president said during his briefing yesterday that they prepared for every contingency except for the fact that the Taliban moved too fast, which of course is not preparation at all. What I would ask of you is to give us a little more specifics. What exactly would your administration, the Trump administration, have done differently to keep the Taliban at bay when and if you pulled those troops out?
Well, three things. The most important of which is we had a strategic understanding. They knew the risk if they pulled the stunt that they pulled these 96 hours, what that would mean for them. We told them we knew where they lived. We knew where their community was. So the first thing we do was we had established American strength, American vigilance, and American power would be brought to bear. So that's the most important thing we would have done differently, is we would have demonstrated our resolve to protect and secure Americans and get our people out. Second, we had an understanding about how we were going to execute the sequence. That includes, importantly, President Trump making abundantly clear to all of us we were going to get all of our equipment out, every stitch. And so we had begun to develop the plans to get that equipment out as well. And we would have never, lastly, we would have never begun to withdraw our military with so many American civilians still on the ground. Those are the folks that work for me, Trace. These are American diplomats and contractors who the Secretary of State has responsibility for. We knew that we would need a military force on the ground capable of making sure that we could get them to the airport and get them where they needed to be. We had thought through these risks, and we were prepared to maintain our deterrence posture, that is the capacity to inflict costs, while we were delivering on President's objective to get our kids home.
Mr. Secretary, you said it right. We're praying for these Afghan people, many of whom sacrificed their lives trying to attach themselves to that plane as it took off yesterday. They want freedom. They want safety. We know that. We know that there's going to be a delicate situation that plays out there for some time to come. We also are left wondering what happens here at home. What is the threat that the latest developments in Afghanistan pose to our national security here?
Boy, Senator, it's an important question. So over time, if the Biden administration hasn't done the hard work that we had thought our way through, right? Our efforts were 4 years in the making, thought our way through about how we're going to maintain a level of understanding of what's taking place on the ground there in a way that could reduce the risk of another attack from the homeland, from Tora Bora, from the east, from the PAC border. We had friends and allies we were working on this with. We still had work to do, but we believe we're in a place we could continue to keep that risk at a reasonable level. Now, with what's happened in these 96 hours, that risk is much greater. I would add to this, too, that this is an interconnected world. You can see what the Chinese are doing. You can see how the Russians are responding, and we know this, too. We have an open southern border today. That terror risk, as we begin to see people flee Afghanistan and movement around Afghanistan, while we have an open southern border, while our law enforcement is being weakened by the fact that we've defunded the police, these are not separate issues, Sandra. These were all part of the Trump administration's understanding about how we protect America and keep America secure and free. The Biden administration simply refuses to do that, to use the strength of American power to deter war.
Mr. Secretary, real quick, last final question there. Do you believe any military leaders that helped carry out the president's orders here, do you believe anybody should be stepping down or resigning based on this?
So there's a time to make that evaluation. It's not today, Sandra. I always remember my basic rules from when I was a cadet at West Point. We had an obligation to execute the plans the president laid out for us when we were soldiers. In the end, it is the commander-in-chief that bears the responsibility for the decisions that he made. And in this case, this is President Biden. He made this decision. He made the decision to pull the pin and begin to withdraw from 2,500 without an adequate set of assurances and understandings and capabilities and planning. In the end, it is the President of the United States that is responsible for what we're watching unfold in Afghanistan today.
And he backs up that decision and went back to Camp David after doubling down on that statement yesterday. Mr. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, thanks for joining us.